This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation Comics proudly presents DC Post-Crisis Management, a monthly miniseries exploring DC Comics crisis events from 1986 through today. Universes will die, continuities will reboot, minds will be bent, and eyes will cross. The end is only the beginning. Is the end. Or some such nonsense.
Place to Be Nation, welcome to the first episode of DC Post-Crisis Management. I'm your host, Russell Sellers. In this limited monthly series, I, along with my special guest, will try to navigate the many worlds, nay, universes of DC Comics from 1986 through today. Why 1986? Well, that was the first time DC Comics wholesale rebooted its entire universe with a massive crossover event called Crisis on Infinite Earths. And that one event has shaped the entirety of DC's history ever since. Today, I'm going to dive into this seminal work and try to make heads or tails of it for you, the listening audience. But I didn't come alone. The manager of Place to Be Nation Comics and producer of this very fine program, Todd Weber, is here to take the journey with me, or rather, to talk me off the ledge when things get to be a little too much. And if you'd like to hear more of our thoughts on this episode or participate in the conversation with us, follow Todd on Twitter at Todd Weber Guitar and me at Russell_Sellers. While you're at it, give the official Place to Be Nation Comics Twitter a follow at PTBN Comics. You can also hear us on the Marvel Age podcast, along with the other two members of the Sarcastic Four, Nick Duke and Tim Capel. But that's enough about Marvel. They get plenty of love from us. It's time to dive into some DC Comics starting right now. Well, Todd, welcome to the first episode ever of DC Post-Crisis Management, and thanks for being here, man.
You're welcome. It's an honor to be here on DC Post-Crisis Management and to be breaking this one in.
Yeah, well, as I stated in the intro, I am already on the couch ready to kind of go over the psychological damage that has been done to me thanks to Crisis on Infinite Earths and many other crises that will be discussed in later episodes. But I figured it was best to bring you in on this because you have said on numerous occasions that this is your favorite crossover event ever. And you, not to tell tales out of school, but you were there while it was being published. You read this one as it was coming out, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I can remember going into the comic shop and picking up issue 1 and then kind of picking up 2 through 6 here and there. It was easier for me to follow along by reading books like Who's Who, and then all the crossovers, and then eventually I got caught up. I think I bought new as they came out 1 and then 7 through 12, just based on my proximity to comic shops and availability as they came, and then I filled in the gaps a little bit later through back issues. Didn't get a trade collection of this for many years, but I got this is one of the rare, I think, quadruple dips for me because I have the issues, I have the deluxe hardcover collection that's signed by everybody, and then I got the absolute edition, and now I have a digital edition as well. So have this 4 different ways.
So you have experienced this in many different iterations. Now, for me, I didn't experience Crisis on Infinite Earths until way after it had been published. It was in the mid 2000s, the first decade of the 2000s, and I was still relatively new to DC whenever I sat down to read it. So a lot of this really was tough to get into because it is, as you know, a very dense work. But it's an incredible work from Marv Wolfman and artist George Perez. a team that had already made their name at DC through New Teen Titans. And prior to that, Marv Wolfman was also an editor on Green Lantern. So he had, a lot of experience at DC already. And when he pitched this idea, initially he wanted it to be just the history of the DC universe. But as it went along and his idea evolved, he soon realized that it was going to mean the end of the larger DC multiverse and a streamlining of DC Comics history. So that's the premise of Crisis on Infinite Earths. This all starts with the end of the larger DC multiverse. No more multiple copies of the various heroes, but we streamline it down to only one definitive version of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, etc. And we move the history forward from there. And this all started, it was published, I believe, in 1986. Or 19
January through December of 1986, one per month.
And what a work it is, because anybody who's familiar with George Perez's art, which is something I'd like to talk about first, this guy, I think this might be, he's done some really great work, don't get me wrong, but I think this might be his best. What do you think?
Looking back, this was more, it looks like it was April of 85 through March of 86 was the chronological release. So I don't know if that's because it came out in January 85 and then dated, how cover dates are a little bit different.
It's but it was in that 85-86 time period,
yeah,
because it was also right around the same time as a couple of other major works like Watchmen and Batman Year One.
Right. And this kind of commemorated the 50th anniversary of the greater DC universe. DC as a whole, dating back to 1935, characters like the Crimson Avenger and eventually Superman in 37, 38, and then Batman. I think Batman is 39, Wonder Woman is 1940. So they were all kind of hitting their 50th anniversary at the time, general time that Crisis was there. And Crisis was kind of a cleanup mission as far as by Wolfman. And I don't know if it was because readers were confused or if it was just so frustrating for editors and writers of the time with these multiple Earths and multiple versions of characters. As a teenage reader or preteen reader at the time, it wasn't so confusing to me. I understood that the heroes, original Golden Age heroes, were the guys that were on Earth 2. And Shazam had his own Earth, and the Crime Syndicate had their own Earth. And just you learn to understand it and know that there were two versions of certain of these characters. And the companion book for Crisis was called Who's Who in the DC Universe. And that ended up running a lot longer than Crisis on Infinite Earths did. But it helped quite a bit. But what was kind of funny is that the continuity of DC as a company changed halfway through Crisis. So when you get to Superman, and they would Who's Who was a alphabetical, and when you got to a certain point, everything changed, and so you had to do all these addendums to Who's Who. But Who's Who was extremely helpful if you were reading Crisis along at the same time. Like, well, who the hell is this? Or why are there multiple characters? Well, this is why. Who's Who was a great cataloging and explanation of all these characters. They didn't have everybody, but it sure had kind of the majority of the relevant people you would need to read. And that was kind of overseen by guys like Len Wein, Bob Greenberger. I believe Mark Waid even had a hand in that first Who's Who. So I have an affection for Crisis, but I also think Who's Who is almost just as important to read as a companion piece to Crisis on Infinite Earths.
That's something that I should definitely get then, because I have never read that, and that might have actually helped me even in this most recent reread of all of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I did to prepare for this episode. It had been a little while, and it's easier for me to pick up on things now because I've been in DC for quite some time. At this point, so I'm very familiar with a lot of these characters, but even still, some of them, it still goes over my head, or it's like I'm glad that someone called them out by name in the series, because I never would have guessed that's who it was. Specifically, the original version of Captain Atom looks nothing like his modern day counterpart. So,
No, no, they definitely redesigned a lot of the characters post-Crisis.
yes, as we said in the title, this all changes everything. The entire history of the DCU winds up not only streamlined but rewritten, and it's all thanks to a villain created by Wolfman and Perez called the Anti-Monitor. Now, the Anti-Monitor has his counterpart in the positive matter universe, as they call it, whereas the Anti-Monitor inhabits the antimatter universe. His counterpart is called the Monitor. Creative, I know. But the mission of the Monitor is to basically keep the universe alive, while the Anti-Monitor wants to, not necessarily, I guess, destroy, but to transform all of the positive matter universes into antimatter, so that he can become the all-powerful supreme being. Now, as villain motivations go, I mean, it's pretty like high concept and cosmic on that end. So what did you think as you went along reading this and seeing the Anti-Monitor's motivations and missions? How did that strike you? What do you think about him as a villain?
Yeah, I suppose you got to have a big bad for these things, and you kind of have to introduce a new level of big bad. This had happened just a little bit after the Secret Wars of Marvel, and Marvel introduced the Beyonder, who was a higher level villain, not even a villain. He was kind of a galactic force that was just a god to these characters. And I could say that the Monitor / Anti-Monitor combo were similar things, but not totally alien to these universes. They'd been watching these characters, cataloging them. In fact, the original name for the Monitor was going to be the Librarian, which is not that threatening, but I think he wanted Wolfman wanted the Librarian to be the be all end all villain of the piece, and then they ended up changing it to a good librarian and a bad librarian. And his ultimate thing was to destroy everything and get all the anti-matter power for himself, all the antimatter energy for himself. And then what then? What next? I don't know. I don't know where they were going to go with it from there. But that wasn't the be all end all of Crisis. Crisis was to streamline everything onto one Earth, one version of all these heroes, and a relatively easy to follow history and continuity. And I think they did that pretty well for about, I don't know, when did they start breaking those rules with things like hypertime, and then eventually the reintroduction of the multiverse? I don't know when that started happening, because you had multiple futures after a while.
Yeah, that will be discussed in later episodes of this show, because we will be covering a couple of events that started to tease out the return of the multiverse, that maybe it never even went away at all, and then one event that brings it loudly screaming back to life. And it's kind of an undoing of a lot of the things that happened here in Crisis on Infinite Earths. But when it comes to like the point where we start in this, we're kind of plunged right into the action, as is, that's kind of the case with most comics, big comic events. They just kind of drop you into the middle of the action. Like the very first thing that happens in Crisis on Infinite Earths in issue 1 is the destruction of an Earth. And we're seeing this all through the eyes of a character named Pariah, who is a character that is kind of he seems like a ghost to anyone who witnesses him on their respective Earths. And he's always drawn to the destruction of a universe. So if a universe is dying, he's going to show up there because he's drawn, as he puts it, drawn to evil. And it's not because he's a bad guy. He doesn't want to see these worlds die. It's a very traumatic event for him, as he's been pulled from one Earth to another to watch them be consumed by the white antimatter nothingness. And for a while, he's our point of view character, but it seems like as Crisis goes along, it keeps shifting from one character to another as to who our POV is supposed to be. So when you're reading Crisis, who do you see as the point of view character?
I would say probably, I believe it's Lila Harbinger. I forget how they pronounce that word, that name. I see her, especially when you get to the Harbinger files later in there. There is a kind of a second screen issue. I believe it's in issue 8. It might be 9 or 10, where Perez does the art in a different style, and you get her perspective on the whole thing. But she's in every issue here. You see her get taken. One of her aspects gets taken over by the Anti-Monitor and introduces a necessary evil to the whole thing, and ultimately kills the positive Monitor. So I think that's maybe the overall POV character. You can look at some of the other characters created for this, but Pariah certainly for part of it, Harbinger for part of it, and I think because each hero has their own Earth's perspective, no one is truly an all consuming, or not all consuming, all applicable POV character. Maybe even Psychopirate too. You see his point of view quite a bit in there, and I know that's a favorite character of you. I know you're going to talk about him quite a bit.
I'm a big fan of Psychopirate, and he's a character that people are going to still be seeing a lot of today. He's kind of a bit of a prominent side character in Tom King's current Batman run, and he pops up throughout several different Crisis events. We'll be seeing him in the sequel to this event in a few episodes. But I feel like from the jump, I don't remember. He was created in the 40s, so he's been around for a very long time. But when you think about his power set, he's one of the darker and potentially most dangerous characters in all of DC Comics, as his abilities, as filtered through his the mask that he uses, can manipulate the emotions of even whole worlds of characters, as we see in Crisis on Infinite Earths, because the Anti-Monitor uses him at one point to control the emotional states of, I think, three different Earths
simultaneously
at once. So it's like his power level is immensely high. Of course, it does seem to drive him. He was already kind of insane, but this kind of pushes him over a different edge to where he's, the type of insane who's barely functioning. But I loved his character in this, just as I love his character typically, and anytime he appears. But he's in a really weird position, because he's one of those characters who's definitely always out for his own survival. He's not the level of insane like the Joker, who probably doesn't care if he lives or dies. He just wants to cause chaos. Psychopirate seems to be like kind of a junkie. He's addicted to other people's emotions, and the more he can take that into himself, the happier he is. And I was a bit confused, though. I didn't really get why the Anti-Monitor necessarily needed Psychopirate to control the emotions of the people on these three Earths. What am I missing here?
The only thing I can think of, having reread it not too long ago, is at that point, those were the next three Earths that were going to be consumed. And so I believe he needed Psychopirate to control the people on that Earth, to unify them against whatever good forces that Harbinger and the Monitor had corralled to protect those Earths, or at least to stave off their elimination. We're seeing Earth by Earth get eliminated here. And so at one point you see Psycho Pirate's powers controlling guys like the Marvel family, or the Freedom Fighters of Earth X, or the Charlton Heroes of Earth 4, as they call it here. We know those Charlton characters. It's impossible to read them without the filter of Watchmen, because that's what Watchmen, all those archetypes were based on the Charlton characters. So I see the original question and I think, oh, it's Rorschach. I think, Captain Atom, maybe not to the level of Dr. Manhattan, but everybody else you can use a pretty good stand-in for.
Yeah,
so
there was a lack of blue penis, so not quite Dr. Manhattan.
No blue dick. You had kind of the weird multicolored Captain Atom costume, which was not one of Ditko's greatest things that he ever did. I do like the post-crisis look that Pat Broderick came up with for Captain Atom quite a bit more.
And speaking of all the different characters that show up in here, it's pretty much every DC character ever. Including some that, as you mentioned before, were created for this event. I believe it was Pariah and Harbinger. Were there any others that were created specifically for this?
I seem to think Lady Quark and her family were created for this, but I don't know that I'd ever read about them before. So it might be the kind of thing where they had an obscure appearance earlier, but she becomes more important later in the Crisis story. We only see her briefly at the beginning when her family dies on their Earth, and then she's summoned to be kind of watched like Pariah for a while and lay dormant. So I think it's the Monitors, Pariah, and Harbinger that are created for this. Although we had seen Lila and the Monitor in some books like Noon Teen Titans, and some Batman and the Outsiders, kind of acting out of character, acting almost like villainous weapon suppliers. We didn't know a whole lot about them at that point, but they were slowly bringing them into the DCU. But once Crisis got going, you get their motivations, and they become fully formed. You understand what these characters are all about.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting cross-section of all these characters. And there are a few characters, though, that are very popular who show up in here, and they pretty much have absolutely nothing to do. You see them kind of on the outskirts, and two of those characters, surprisingly enough, are Batman and Robin. They show up. You get a quick glimpse of them. Batman has a little bit of an investigative thing going on. I believe it's in issue 2, and he has a really unfortunate panel with the Joker, where he has been sprayed by some white gooey substance from the Joker's flower, and then you see his face afterwards. He's covered in this stuff. Yeah, it's very it'll take you back. But the part that happens after that is Barry Allen, the Flash, just suddenly appears out of nowhere and seems to be going on and on about everything is dying around him, and he's looking for his wife Iris, and Batman's trying to talk to him, but he's not getting much of a response out of him, and then he just watches Flash kind of wither and disintegrate into nothing in front of him. And that's kind of the first hints of a major character who's going to die in this event. So that is one thing I did want to ask you about, because you'd kind of grown up with Barry Allen being the Flash, and Wally West was Kid Flash.
Yes, and at the time of Crisis publication, Flash had been kind of off the table for a little while. He had just wrapped up his regular series where he was transported into the future, having been exonerated for the Reverse Flash's death. Mm-hmm. And we hadn't really seen a whole lot of him since then. He wasn't showing up in Justice League issues so much. He was just kind of happy in the future. We didn't know what happened. They lived happily ever after. So seeing Flash come back was maybe a bit of okay, well, something is going to happen, but you get later in the series an explanation of why Flash made that appearance to Batman and had changed a little bit and was terrified. So that was kind of cool that you had that set up and payoff later.
And how impactful was his death on you? Like seeing this character who had seemingly gotten a bit of a happy ending prior to this, only to come back and die kind of horribly.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled about it at the time. I think I remember reading in the letters pages, or Marv Wolfman would do an introduction on the inside cover of each issue, and he had said during the issue, I believe it's the very issue that Flash dies, that he had written a way to bring him back. So, or maybe that might be just me associating that. But right away, I'd heard that Wolfman had built a way to bring Flash back. And of course, he never does come back that way. He ends up coming back years and years later via Jeff Johns' machinations. But it bummed me out a little bit, but I could also see where they were going with Kid Flash. It was kind of not a spoiler to me to have Kid Flash be revealed as the new, maybe depowered a little bit Flash character at issue 12. Or, I had hopes for Jay Garrick too, because that was an underused character, but because he survived the crisis. A lot of the Golden Age characters who didn't share the same alter ego with their antecedents did end up surviving. You had Alan Scott show up or finish out, still being around. You had all these characters that were inspirations to the original characters, but you didn't have the Golden Age Batman. He never existed. You didn't have the Golden Age Robin, which is very tragic. You had a lot of characters just get kind of, well, we're going to keep this trademark. We're going to keep telling stories with this character, but this version is gone. And that was kind of sad to me. You had other things end up happening, like the All-Star Squadron, which had been telling stories of the Golden Age JSA characters, Earth 2 characters. That book had to be totally rewritten and changed after the crisis. A lot of characters were just yanked from continuity. And then they told Roy Thomas, who was writing it, created this book called Young All-Stars, which told the stories of the characters that were replacements. History hates a vacuum. So you had a Superman replacement, you had a Wonder Woman replacement, you had an Aquaman replacement, you had a Batman replacement. That was the story of the Young All-Stars, and they didn't stick around too long. They weren't ultimately that important to DC continuity. In fact, you didn't see a lot of the World War II stories continuing too much longer after Crisis wrapped up. All-Star Squadron was pretty done, but it was a fairly popular series leading into Crisis. And
for the first 6 issues of Crisis, at least in my most recent rereading of it, it feels like we're doing like a metric ton of universe building. It's not even world building, it's universe building, because it all feels like it's setting the stage and introducing us to our huge cast of players, getting us used to the idea of Harbinger's multiple personalities, pariahs jumping around from Earth to Earth. As we've talked about, the multiple versions of these characters, all of them kind of coming together and beginning to slowly start to understand that their multiverse or their universes are dying all around them. It's affecting their worlds in various ways, including like crazy weather patterns, red skies, time even being in flux, like there are dinosaurs showing up in random places, modern heroes interacting with World War II characters who then go on to interact with some earliest humans. We even have Commandy, the last boy on Earth, is kind of prominent at one point in the story.
Yes.
And you have all of this stuff happening all around you, and it can be a lot. It can be a lot on a person to try and take all of that in. So I know what method I used to approach it, so that it made it less intimidating of a read. But how would you pitch someone, especially on these first 6 issues of Crisis? How would you suggest they get into reading this if it's their first time?
Well, I would probably pick up the trade or pick up the issues, whatever way you can, but I would also make sure you got a copy of the Crisis on Infinite Earths Index, which was published by a third company, a third party. It wasn't DC officially licensed, but it was in comic form. It took each issue and then had all the crossovers listed, and as each character came out, it would tell you where that character came from. Plus, it would summarize each issue because there's a lot going on here. I've read it, boy, countless times, and I still forget. Oh yeah, that was happening. Well, these Earths are coming together because that's the only way to save them, and that's a part I don't think I remembered from the originally. I thought that was they were all merging, and you had to stop them from merging. What merging was because the universes were being eliminated one by one. So
yeah, and at one point to protect, I think it's the 3. At first, it's 3 remaining Earths, and then it ultimately becomes 5 universes that the Anti-Monitor is trying to consume. Alexander Luthor of Earth 3, who is a character also created for this story, he is a being made up of matter and antimatter. So he has seemingly this ability to create this little pocket universe to protect all of these 5 remaining Earths, to hide them from the Anti-Monitor. Unfortunately, by putting them all in the same space, they slowly begin to merge into a single Earth, which will, according to them, result in the destruction of all 5.
And like you were saying earlier, you had Earths merging, but you also had timelines, past and future merging, which was really kind of jarring. You had the Legion of Superheroes, and then the World War II Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, and all those characters from DC's rich history. I mean, you had all kinds of stories being told in their timeline, all in the same book, and it was just massive undertaking here. Imagine being the editor for this book.
Good God, no.
Yeah. Oh, all right, if you say so, Marv. Okay, cool. I'll sign off on it.
I think Marv just has to edit himself on this one. There's no way. I don't know. I am imagining the nightmare scenario of trying to put this in front of a single editor or even a team of editors, everyone trying to check what continuity is. But you know what? That's actually kind of the convenient thing about an event like this. The larger continuity isn't really going to matter all that much because you've got so many characters at once. You don't really get much of a chance to delve deep into their histories or to reference a lot of events that had happened to them. You just have to worry about getting the voices for these characters, which is something I got to give Marv Wolfman a lot of credit for. This is a book of literally hundreds of characters, hundreds of different characters.
Hundreds and hundreds, yeah.
And many of them do get, important scenes and like actual dialogue and real interaction with each other. And almost none of them share the same voice. And to me, that is the real testament of Marv Wolfman's ability as a writer, is that he was able to craft these individual sounding voices for each of these characters for so many issues. And the thing is, these issues are not drawn or laid out in the way that comics are today, where you get like these big splash pages and an immense amount of detail, but maybe not a ton of dialogue. This still has a ton of dialogue. There are pages with lots and lots of panels on them, yet still manages to have some of the most hyper detailed art that you're ever going to see. So if you don't believe that George Perez is the master of comic book superhero art, this book should make you a believer in it. If it doesn't, I don't know what your standards are. I don't know how to meet it, because this to me is like, this is where it's at.
Yeah, no other artist could have done this.
No.
With the level of detail, the character designs, all the things he had to draw, storytelling. I usually say you can tell a good artist because you can follow the story going on without the dialogue, but I don't think that's possible with this particular case.
No, it's a little too much.
Yeah, but so much, the way he draws the Earth's being destroyed by the white light, the red skies, the rubble, all the destruction. Great character designs for the new characters. Clear representations of which Superman is which Wonder Woman is which, based on the art he's style for each one. Just awesome. You'll never be able to praise Perez's work in Crisis enough. It's definitive. It's his greatest achievement, I think. And imagine how big he had to blow these pages up to get the level of detail, in each one. You have to zoom in to see all the stuff going on.
I mean, this was back in the mid 80s whenever he was doing all this, so I'm imagining just how big his drafting table was. How big was it? How big were the sheets of paper he was drawing on?
Yeah, I mean, he quite the workhorse. Imagine getting just this series done in a year, but there were times where he was still doing Titans books at the same time, or he took off a lot. He did quite a bit of. He gave himself a head start on this book, as I understand it. So
yeah,
there's a big long stretch of Titans where he was done with it and he had moved on to here, and then after this he went to Wonder Woman. So, but he gave himself a nice long ramp to get onto this. There were some other characters we forgot to talk about that were created. Of course, you mentioned Luthor. There was also Lady Wildcat. Ted Grant was replaced by Wildcat 2.
Yolanda Montez. And she is a character who apparently doesn't last long, because this, as I was reading this, I was like, oh my God, I forgot she even existed.
Yeah, they threw her into Infinity Inc., I believe. But which was kind of the logical place for that character, but I don't remember much about what happened to her afterwards.
Yes, I've read a lot of the post-crisis DC comics, and I don't really recall her having much of a role, if anything. And eventually, Ted Grant comes back. So, the original Wildcat rejoins his Justice Society brethren, and Jay Garrick and Alan Scott. So, I guess Yolanda is just one of those characters who's kind of lost to history, but this is really her most prominent appearance, I think. This is her time to shine.
And there was a time after this that they took the Justice Society current versions, the older versions of them, off the table too. Ironically, all the talk about Ragnarok lately, they were fighting the Battle of Ragnarok after this.
Yes.
And and so they were off in a pocket universe or in Asgard or something, and they weren't even available to DC after the Crisis for a long time. The Golden Age versions of the characters, just to keep things clear, I suppose.
And there's one other character who was created for this, but she's had a much longer and more prominent history, and that was a new version of Dr. Light. Dr.
Light, right. And she was an unhappy person in these issues. She was definitely given her own character.
Her character arc might be the most, or one of the most emotional ones in the book to me, because she starts out as you said, she's very angry, and she's really just a generally unpleasant person. Just not somebody that I would care to be around, because she's very just obnoxious with her "I'm always right" opinions, and she really looks down on everybody around her because everybody else to her seems really stupid. But as she evolves as a character, she starts to take on a much more heroic stance, and by the end of the book, she's been inspired by the sacrifice of a few of these different heroes, and she really steps up and becomes a very prominent hero herself. And that brings me to the next point I wanted to cover, was the back half of Crisis, because we've talked about the first 6 issues here and how it can be pretty confusing. So reading the recaps and indexes of these issues would certainly help. But Todd, I think you mentioned to me that Crisis on Infinite Earths #7 might be your favorite issue, like your favorite comic ever.
Yeah, it is definitely one of my top 5, I would say. Beyond the Silent Night, I believe, is the title of the story, and it's it's Supergirl's greatest moment as a character. Sadly, because it's this version of Supergirl's last moment as a character. But she, just the whole arc with her and the Anti-Monitor, and she leaving everybody beyond to just sacrifice herself, is so beautifully done. I've read it and reread it, and I used to take, when I was aspiring to become an artist, I would write sequences, draw sequences out of this. I just adore that issue 7, and it's extra sized too. I believe it's a double-sized issue.
It definitely is, because that's the most memorable thing that happens in the issue. Is you have this team of heroes who all go to confront the Anti-Monitor where he lives. They're going to the planet Quard, which is the antimatter universe equivalent to Oa, the home planet of the Guardians of the Universe and the central headquarters of the Green Lantern Corps. And from Quard is where the Anti-Monitor has kind of launched his offensive, but he is back there now, seemingly laying in wait for these heroes. He's kind of goaded them into coming to him. So you have both versions of Superman that have survived. You've got the Superman of Earth 1 and Earth 2. You've got Lady Quark. You have Uncle Sam from the Freedom Fighters, and you also have Blue Beetle.
And Captain Marvel, too, or Shazam, as they call him now.
Yes, Shazam. They still do refer to him as Captain Marvel in this, of course. But he's there. But what you also get in this is kind of the origin point for the Crisis. Like, issue 7 really is the issue that brings it all together. Like, you've had a lot of stage setting in the prior issues, but for me, whenever I'm reading issue 7, I'm like, this is where this whole story begins to gel and things start to make more sense, because we see the birth of the multiverse, how it came to be, thanks to a rogue Guardian named Krona, who will be a very prominent Green Lantern villain during the Jeff Johns run on the character. But this is where we see Krona trying to look into the past, peer into the past to see the birth of the universe, even though it's known to the Guardians that any attempt to do this could result in the destruction of the universe. And Krona just doesn't care. He just wants to know this. He wants all knowledge for himself, no matter what. And when he peers into the past and sees that giant blue hand seemingly creating the universe, it causes this massive split that fractures the singular universe into a multiverse from the past. So as all of this happens, at the time, the present day for them would be the Guardians put Krona on trial, and they sentence him to be not necessarily killed, but turned into some kind of like energy force that's doomed to roam the universe disembodied for all of eternity.
You get the origins of not only the multiverse, not only the Anti-Monitor, not only the Monitor, but you get Pariah and Harbinger as well.
Yes, they tell.
We really kind of, like, everything has been leading to this. You get the whole story, and you just, as soon as I see what's going on. We've got the Earths, and their heroes are kind of segregated again, kind of regrouping, figuring out what to do next. Alexander Luthor pulls some of the more powerful ones, and they go on a strike force mission to Quard, where the weaponers of Quard come from. Other former, I think, of the Gil Kane art for them. Antimatter. I've been saying Anti-Monitor so much. Antimatter villains, classic Green Lantern stuff. But ironically, we don't really have a lot of Green Lantern in Crisis to this point. John Stewart was in the first issue. Hal Jordan is nowhere to be found. We had a couple check-ins on the Corps. The Green Lantern Corps were checking out stuff earlier, but we didn't get a whole lot of time with them. So it's kind of perplexing, this big cosmic threat, but we don't have a lot of Green Lantern to this point.
No, we don't. And we don't really get much of them until near the end of the story when Guy Gardner becomes the new Green Lantern of Earth, or he's reinstated. It's kind of hard to tell this exactly what the deal here is, but I guess that's why I get little editor notes in here that say I should read something like Green Lantern 195, which is where the story of Guy Gardner picks up after, I believe it's issue 9. Yeah, issue 9 of Crisis. So, but before we move on to that, I did want to remark just a little bit more on the death of Supergirl. It is, I think you said it really well. It's just one of the most emotionally impactful moments of this series. One of the most emotionally impactful moments in comics, because it really does push Superman over the edge. He is fully ready to kill the Anti-Monitor with his bare hands, and it's not often that you see Superman so enraged, but he's to that point. Though it's Superman of Earth 2, the Kal-El, letter L, not EL, who kind of talks him off the ledge and says, we need to get out of this place before things start kind of collapsing down around our ears. So they do that, get back to Earth 1, and you have this kind of a memorial ceremony for Supergirl. You have Batgirl kind of reading the eulogy.
Yes,
and it's done really well. This is a really moving moment, and especially the final page of the issue, when Superman has Kara's body wrapped in her cape, and he flies her into space. I thought that was a beautiful way to end it. So that, while this may be a dense and even challenging read at times, when you get to the end of issue 7, it's the issue that's, I think that's the make or break issue. If you've been struggling with it up to then, but you get to the end of issue 7 and you're not fully in it, I don't know that you're going to be able to get there. Get there.
It's kind of like Esther, get off the pot, because this is it's the best issue so far. It kind of summarizes things. It provides the most heroic moments. Oh my gosh, what a cover. We have, of course, seen that pose before, the hero holding the prone other hero. You've seen it with Cyclops and Jean Grey. You've seen it with Odin and Thor, going back to Kirby. I mean, there's Tumblr pages that will show you. If you just type in Crisis 7 cover inspiration, you'll see they use it to this day. It's kind of a cliche, but also Perez draws all the other heroes in the background. It's just an amazing work. Art in the issue suffers maybe a little bit towards the second half. You can see some of the inks maybe a little rushed. At times there were 3 different inkers for this book. You could tell Giordano had started it as an inker. Ordway came on. I think Mike DiCarlo might be another inker who was used. I'm not 100% sure, but Giordano and Ordway, you can always tell it's Ordway inks. There's more cross-hatching on the cheeks and things like that. Ordway is a very distinctive artist and inker. I really like the combination of he and Perez. But yeah, Crisis 7 is where it's at. If I was going to just reread one issue, it would be that one. But the whole story is amazing, but that's the one time capsule issue for me.
And I feel like maybe if you want to get into this story, you could conceivably read issue 7 as a standalone story, because it's giving you the beginnings of all of this. So if somebody wanted to see like the origin of the multiverse, the beginnings of how the larger and like crazier side of the DC universe came to be, that issue can give it to you, all while also giving you this great emotional climax that will take it down as like one of the best comic issues ever written.
Yeah, it's like Star Trek 2 for me. I get a lot of deja vu reading this and to the death of Spock in Star Trek 2.
Well, that is some high praise, and that I think that's a good selling point for that issue for people to go and check it out. Now, the DC Universe app is currently available, and I highly recommend anyone listening to this go get it, because it's an invaluable resource for this podcast and for future episodes of this podcast, and maybe something else down the road as well. Unfortunately, you can only get like 3 issues of Crisis on Infinite Earths there for the time being, but I'm sure that will be expanding.
It's a work in progress, I think.
For sure it is. And there are plenty of really good things on there for you to read, but the issues 2, 3, and 4 of Crisis on Infinite Earths are there, which is an odd
It's kind of random,
yeah. So it's really strange, but as we've also said, this story has been reprinted over and over and over again, and it's one of those that's such a seminal classic that you can't really imagine it ever just going out of print. It's far too influential, and I think it makes way too much money for DC Comics for them to ever just stop publishing it, because it's one of those that I don't know that I would hand this to someone as like, hey, this is the first ever DC Comics experience you're going to have here, Crisis on Infinite Earths. No, no. I wouldn't do that to someone.
No.
I feel like that's just that's far too much, too dense of a place to start. But if you were to hand this book to someone, how much DC lore do you think they should take in before they jump into this?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's one that I don't even have an answer for, honestly, because I had only read a bit of DC Comics before I jumped into Crisis on Infinite Earths, because I had heard so much about it. I'd always heard people talk about how great this event is. So I thought, all right, well, I'll give this a shot. And the first time through, it was tough. It was a tough read. Couldn't get through part of it for a while, but luckily there were internet resources out there that helped me to get me where I needed to be in terms of understanding the story. So I do highly recommend people do that if you're going to jump into this and you're still relatively new to DC Comics. But
I wonder how interesting how if you've read Infinite Crisis, how this story changes for you.
Oh boy.
And I know, and that's a future podcast, but
we are going to get to the sequel to this, which is Infinite Crisis by Jeff Johns and Phil Jimenez. And that today, oddly enough, is my favorite DC Comics crossover event. So I can't say that I did read Crisis on Infinite Earths before I read Infinite Crisis. And that does put a lot of this into context, and I think that that's what what really helps is the original Crisis. Even though it's a little odd to call it that, because there were other stories called Crisis before this one.
Yeah, Crisis on Earth Z or whatever. They were usually reserved for the Justice League and Justice Society team ups that would happen every year in the pages of the Justice League of America comic. And
you had one called Crisis on Two Earths, which I believe introduced the crime syndicate.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was an annual event, and everybody looked forward to it, and they would use this to bring in other Earths too. They brought in the Earth X characters, the Freedom Fighters, and you had the All-Star Squadron, you had a Legion one.
Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty common thing throughout DC history to have these events that they call crisis. And this was just the biggest one up to this point. And it was kind of honestly, if you look at it for what it is, you could have said this is the crisis to end all crises, versus like the ones that happened before. So even the idea of multiple Earths was not introduced in this. It had always been something that, as we mentioned before, something that DC had always been working with. And I'm kind of like you, Todd. I don't find it difficult to be able to separate these Earths, but I can see from an outsider's like perspective that it can be a little daunting trying to tell like which Earth is which continuity am I supposed to be following. And even as something that happened to Wolfman himself, he actually got a letter from a fan in 1981 asking why a character in an issue of Green Lantern didn't actually recognize Green Lantern despite having worked with them just an issue like a few years earlier. Like what was the problem there? So that was kind of the genesis of Crisis on Infinite Earths. It was like, okay, well, we need to streamline the history, and that's how this was born.
At that point, you'd had so many Kryptonians. You had
God, yes,
Supergirl. You had the Phantom Zone criminals. You had all the bottled city of Kandor. You had a lot of characters wearing the Superman S. They wanted to make Superman more special. Of course, post-Crisis, he wasn't the first hero of the DCU anymore. Whereas, going back to Earth 2, he was the first. He was the standard bearer. But it definitely cleared the table and allowed John Byrne to tell very special stories, redefining Superman for a new generation, starting all over from scratch. And it accomplished that. I mean, unfortunately, you took away things like the Legion of Superheroes. You could no longer have Superboy influencing the formation of the Legion. And Paul Levitz wrote a very creative way around that. And then they had to undo that altogether. So the repercussions that happened in Legion of Superheroes were really frustrating for fans of that book. I
imagine so. And that's another thing I wanted to ask you about, because you'll have a very to our comics contingent here at Place to Be Nation Comics, you're going to have a unique perspective on this, because Perez and Wolfman had also been doing New Teen Titans around this same time. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that book continued after Crisis on Infinite Earths came to an end, didn't it? At least I think it did. But what I was hoping to find out was what your thoughts on the changes to Titans, because they had undergone changes before. They had even changed in the course of the Wolfman and Perez title before Crisis, because things like Dick Grayson becoming Nightwing, that happened before Crisis on Infinite Earths ever occurred.
And Kid Flash not being Kid Flash, he had walked away from even wearing the costume anymore. He quit around the same time Robin. Grayson decided not to be Robin, and then came back. But you'd gone through the whole Jericho introduction. You had Cole. You had new characters on the Titans at this point. But Perez was done with Titans, I believe, until issue 50 or so. And even then, it was just to come back and try to fix Donna Troy, and that became a big mess after all. So I think this was still kind of the end of the golden era for the Wolfman Perez Titans, was leading into Crisis. After that, the Baxter series, there was a premium Titans book that came out, so that you had two Teen Titans books coming out. You had the newsstand one, and then you had a comic shop exclusive. And eventually they would put the reprints of the premium one into the newsstand one, and then eventually that book died off. But Perez only did the first 6 or so issues of that, and some of my favorite stuff. It's a great Trigon and Raven story. But after that, he was all in on books like Crisis, and then, like I said, into Wonder Woman. They gave him carte blanche to do Wonder Woman after this, and Crisis set the stage for that as well.
It did, and there were a lot of things that Crisis did that I thought were really excellent, not just for the heroes, but for some of the villains as well. One notable one that I absolutely loved the version of in this was Brainiac. It reminded me most of the take on Brainiac from Superman the Animated Series and from Justice League Unlimited.
This was a co-opting of the Superpowers Brainiac created by Jack Kirby for the toy line and tie-in comic. And so there was a Brainiac figure, I think dated 83 or 84, that has shared the ship design, shared the was the robotic Brainiac. I love that too, Russell. It's kind of my Brainiac, you know. Before leading up to that, Brainiac was a weird looking green dude in black short pants and white booties.
Yeah.
You know, not a threat.
Not a good look. He looked like he was wearing a romper before they were popular. And that look doesn't work for me. I don't really care for the Koluan version of Brainiac. I prefer him to be more of the robot android created to be a gatherer of all information and knowledge in the universe. I don't mind the combination of those two things so much, which has been what a lot of artists and writers have done with that character in more recent years. But this take in Crisis on Infinite Earths is that is my Brainiac as well. This is what I feel like Brainiac should be. This is him fully realized.
And there's a great issue, I think it's 9, where you get the unified villains kind of taking advantage of things, of the weakened heroes. I believe it's 9. I'll have to cycle through here.
It is.
It is, yeah, and an amazing cover. Oh my gosh, just like the definitive, all of the villains of the multiverse cover by Perez on issue 9. And, you know, that came right after issue 8 where Flash had sacrificed himself. But that Brainiac design, and don't get a lot of Perez drawing the Joker. It's not one of my favorite versions, but you also get the swan song to the scientist Luthor as well here.
Yeah, he's kind of moving away from that, and we're starting to see that evolution of the Lex Luthor character, which will be fully realized under John Byrne. Like right after Crisis on Infinite Earths, when Man of Steel runs as a 6-issue miniseries, and then Superman relaunches under him. But you have all the villains working together in issue 9, where they're trying to like stake their claim, like, oh, the heroes are spread thin. Brainiac and Luthor devise this plan where they're going to rule the remaining Earths, and they have all the confidence in the world that these heroes and villains will just wipe each other out, and that they'll defeat the Anti-Monitor, at least to a point. But even Brainiac, after a while, starts to become afraid of him, which is something that I thought was a pretty brilliant piece of writing from Wolfman, in that he had portrayed Brainiac as having like little to no emotion whatsoever up to this point, but then he seems genuinely afraid of the Anti-Monitor. So really good storytelling, great interactions with the villains, and getting to see big groups of villains who might not otherwise have worked together, taking on a real hodgepodge group of heroes. It's just a lot of fun.
It is. It's fun. You do get kind of interesting groupings of characters like Killer Frost and Captain Cold and the Weather Wizard. You get a lot of the plant-based villains, like Poison Ivy and Jason Woodrue. Mm-hmm. It was a chance to have a little bit of fun with it, stretching it out, because you keep you could just finish the series in a hurry if you needed to, but they did let it breathe a little bit and get to develop some more of these characters and these concepts, and give the heroes that are about to die, give them a little bit of a showcase as well. because we're going to lose characters like the Golden Age Wonder Woman and this version of Luthor. Everything's going to change here very soon. So you get them, not only you get them to have like a final moment of glory, but you also get to reintroduce characters like Captain Marvel to the universe. Everybody knew who Shazam was, but he gets a little bit of a spotlight here coming up too. So you get a little bit of the groundwork for the new DC universe, non-multiverse. And you also got this little, in issue 10, the Harbinger files or the Monitor files, where Lila goes throughout the galaxy and you see a lot of the things that haven't been covered in Crisis to this point. Things like the Legion of Supervillains, and you get Starman, the Prince Gavin version. You get a lot of the Adam Strange characters like that mentioned, and that almost leads into the history of DC Universe that came out the year after this. And I don't know if you've ever seen that. That's Wolfman and Perez too.
That's one that I definitely need to get and
it's beautiful.
Add to my collection. That is something that will for sure be added after all this. And I'm glad we sat down to kind of discuss all of this, because it's helping to put it all in a much easier to understand place for me. Because as I mentioned in the intro, this is all about me laying on the couch with my various chosen psychiatrists to come in here and allow me to kind of talk through the issues and let them explain their perspectives on it to me. And as we come to the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, we get the new Earth is born out of the remains of those five as they were brought together by Alexander Luthor, and you have certain characters who have made their way over. We've mentioned that certain characters from the JSA are here, and we wind up with two Supermen. We've got Earth 1 and Earth 2 Superman, with the Earth 2 Superman realizing that his Earth no longer exists, which means his universe doesn't. His Krypton never did. And it's something that starts to drive he and a few other characters who come to this realization about themselves. It drives them a bit, towards insanity.
Robin, Earth 2 Robin.
Yep, the Earth 2 Robin and Huntress.
Yeah, they just are people without a place here. And I was hoping that they would, instead of what they ended up doing with Superman and Lois, the Earth 2 versions, I was hoping that he would survive, and you would have to find a way for him to be heroic but not be Superman anymore on Earth 1 or on the new Earth. But I thought that would be an interesting story. But of course, I was a really weird 15-year-old at that point, I think. Let's have this tragic character who his whole universe is gone, except for maybe Power Girl, and let's see him create a new identity and still be a hero. But Superman is Superman, so
he is, and that's not even we haven't even done the final battle of the heroes versus the Anti-Monitor. Like before all of that happened, before we even got to the creation of the new Earth, it looked like, at least on the surface, that they had defeated the Anti-Monitor. That he was completely beaten by Superman of Earth 2, by Superboy of Earth Prime, who is a character that we haven't really touched on too much.
Yeah, he was a character created in I think the very last issue of DC Comics Presents. Earth Prime's deal was that it had no superheroes. It was our Earth. We lived there. But of course, in the Justice League books, they had a character named Ultra who came from Earth Prime, and he was a hero that interacted with the Justice League. But then later, if they were getting rid of Earth Prime, which apparently it died very early here in the Crisis, we're all dead.
Whoops.
Yeah, they saved that Superboy almost as a Deus Ex Machina, because he got to impact the story quite a bit, but he wasn't in it for much of it until 11, 12.
Yeah, he doesn't show up until maybe issue 10.
Yeah.
And by then we're gathering up all the remaining heroes and villains to go and like launch a full assault on the Anti-Monitor at the beginning of time, where he has gone to hide out. And everyone
stop the multiverse from being created, right? Or what was
he was going to not necessarily prevent the creation of the multiverse, but it was going to be an antimatter multiverse.
Okay,
and it was going to be all him, like it was all going to feed his power, be created in his image, and everything would be, I guess, a multiverse of nothing but pure evil and darkness. So you have all of these heroes able to travel there, along with your mystic heroes working with Dr. Fate inside the Tower of Fate to create a kind of mystic shield, or something to absorb all the shadow creatures that the Anti-Monitor used as his warriors. They were going to keep them at bay, and then even though all this seems to be going sort of okay, the Anti-Monitor kind of starts to get the upper hand again. He's absorbing all the power from these heroes, which is what he wanted in the first place, as it turns out, for them to travel back to this time, or to the beginning of time, thanks to Alexander Luthor's ability to open a portal back to that point. And while it seems like the tide is turning towards the Anti-Monitor, the Spectre shows up just out of nowhere.
Yeah, he had been in issue 10.
Yep, he had been there. We knew he was coming in. We didn't know what role he was going to play, but he shows up and reaching into this the same void that the Anti-Monitor is reaching into. You get this massive explosion and seemingly the breaking of the beginning of the multiverse. So at the end of that issue, you're thinking, oh no, did they just completely end the multiverse? So did everything just blink out of existence because of this battle? But at the beginning of the very next issue, which is issue 11, titled Aftershock,
right? That's the new Earth is born.
Yeah, the very first thing you see is the new and now only Earth, the only remaining Earth, is here. Really funny scene at the beginning of it with the Superman of Earth 2 waking up in his apartment. It seems like everything's fine. Of course, in his mind, he's the editor of the Daily Star.
Daily Star.
He goes to the Daily Planet office, never even looking up to see that it's called the Daily Planet, not the Star. He walks into the editor's office and sits down at the table sits down at the desk like it's his, just going about his business. And in walks Perry White, asking just who in the hell this person thinks he is.
I always like it's Uncle Clark.
Yes.
I like that. So Uncle Superman.
Yes, the Superman of Earth 1 shows up, or Clark Kent of Earth 1 shows up, and it's like, oh, it's my Uncle Clark, the guy I'm named after. It's like, good save. That's kind of meta. I love it. Yes.
I like that. I like that issue too, because you have the two remaining Supermen, not counting Superboy of Earth Prime, and then Jay Garrick and Wally West in search of the other multiverses, or the other Earths, and they're all gone. They find that this is all that's left.
And this is also the issue where Wally finally figures out, or finally understands, that Barry Allen is indeed dead.
Yeah, I think he sees that flash in literal flash forward in issue 12 when they're on at the Anti-Monitor's place, and Anti-Monitor's castle, fortress, and Flash shows up, and it's him running through time like he did in issue 2.
Yep.
And then he finally finds the corpse, or the psychopirate, with Barry's remains, and Wally kind of goes nuts on him.
He finds Psycho-Pirate has Barry's suit, his just the Flash costume, and the ring that it came in, and it's at that moment when Wally really he kind of loses it for a little bit, but he gains his composure after a minute and realizes that he is he and Jay are like the last speedsters left.
And we didn't have a Speed Force or any of that Flash mythology back then.
No,
this was just kind of Flash is gone. he's dead.
Yeah, none of that exists at all. But as we see here, all the heroes are able to come back together, and they launch an all-out. As the Anti-Monitor reappears in his new armor, like looking, like really.
I love that design. Yeah,
the design of the Anti-Monitor is just badass. This is one of those that you just have to experience for yourself. It's a tremendous design from Perez. But you have all the heroes come back together in a. I will say in the final issue, Final Crisis, as it's called. It can be kind of tough to follow in the layout, so you have to really watch how you do it, because there are times whenever you're reading top to bottom, left to right, but then there are other times where you're going like across the whole page, and then it's like, okay, my God, there's so much happening here, and I can't really sometimes follow what Perez's thinking is in his layouts.
What panel view is meant for, if you can do panel view, it helps quite a bit. Boy, it slows down the reading of these issues quite a bit too. If you go to panel view, you really get to savor these books. One thing I like about issue 12 is how many false finishes, how many times they think they've taken him out, and everybody else, the different characters, different aspects get a chance to step up and have their moment. Like Darkseid gets a turn. Yeah. Adam, Pariah gets some redemption in here. Yeah, I enjoyed 12, maybe my second favorite issue, just because all the stuff that goes down in it.
It does have a hell of an ending. It's one of those like really great stand up and cheer finishes to a crossover event. And
that last panel of letter L, that's just gorgeous. It's definitive. I love it so much.
I'm right there with you. I absolutely love, especially, and I think one thing that I truly do love is the bit when this doctor is telling, or Jay is telling Wally that his test results are good. He's actually his powers aren't killing him anymore. Which was why he stopped being Kid Flash in the first place, was because the use of his powers was hurting him. But now that's not the case. He can only run at the
speed of sound.
Speed of sound up to this point. That will change later. But Wally looks a bit more grown up in these panels. Like he looks like he's aged into adulthood. And this is the first time he puts on the Flash costume proper and adopts the name for himself. So for me, this is the moment whenever the Flash that I grew up with came to be. So that's another reason I think new DC fans really should read this. Like after you've read a few stories featuring your favorite character, you need to go back and check this out, especially if you're a Flash fan or a Wally West fan, or if you've ever been interested in the character at all. This is the moment where he's no longer Kid, he is the Flash. And that's, for me, one of the greatest moments in DC Comics history. So, in a story that's already packed with them. But finally, one that doesn't involve a character dying. This one involves a character stepping up and a legacy character being allowed to take on the mantle of their mentor and would keep it for a really long time. So
and we can debate why they brought back Barry when maybe they had felt that they'd done all that they could with Wally, but he was my Flash too, and I know he was Ben's Flash too, and if you read the Wade run particularly, and then later Jeff Johns, and even some of the Bill Loeb stuff, Flash solo series was great. And prior to this, the Infantino Carrie Bates Flash was not an awesome book. It was kind of very stale at this point. So I always enjoyed Wally in Teen Titans, and he was kind of a tragic character there. But Flash, as a character after this, gets a new lease new lease on life, and he becomes a little bit more lighthearted as a character. So he was about my age, well, not about my age, but he was a young character I could relate to. I liked where they were going with this icon. I think they were told not to mess with Batman too much. If we look at everybody that changed, Batman changed very little, although Jason Todd changed quite a bit after this.
Yeah, a lot of people won't realize that whenever they read Batman and Robin. In this, the Robin they're seeing is actually Jason Todd, and that didn't strike me until I looked at the dialogue a little bit closer and realized he was referring to Robin as Jay a couple of times, and I was like, wait a minute, wait. Mm-hmm. That's Jason Todd. That is not Dick Grayson. Because you look over when you see the the Titans getting involved in things. Dick Grayson is Nightwing.
Yeah.
So this was definitely. I was like, okay, so this was before the personality transfer for Jason Todd. Whenever he was basically Dick Grayson, just with a different name.
Right.
There was no discernible difference between the two. But as we move on, of course, we know that he gets a personality transplant, and it would be Frank Miller who would redefine Batman after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that's actually available in its entirety on the DC Universe streaming app right now. So if you want to read Batman Year One, you can go do that.
Is it 401 through 404? I think that's it.
Yeah, that's. I believe that is correct.
But it's featured though. You'll see just Batman Year One.
Oh yeah.
And it's a 4-issue series, and it's perfect. There's nothing wrong in the world. It is absolutely perfect. Great story, great art. They're still sticking with a lot of the continuity established with it to this day. It's one of my top 3 favorite Batman stories.
I would say that it starts in Batman issue 404 and goes to issue 407.
Okay. I don't know what was going on with 401. Maybe that was the Magpie issue or something like that.
But yeah, everything in Batman Year One is still influential today. You don't see any real evidence of that in Crisis on Infinite Earths. It still comes off as I would say the Denny O'Neil and like Neil Adams version of Batman, because they were probably the most prominent one. It's still the 70s blue cape and cowl with the yellow oval, and he's written very much like that version of the character. So he's not in this story very much, but like we said, you will see a reinvention of Batman shortly after this, and I will be talking with some folks about that seminal story at a later time. But I did want to mention the epilogue to Crisis on Infinite Earths as we close. The Psycho Pirate has survived this whole incident, and he is one of a very few characters at the end of this who still remembers the event, the Crisis events, the multiverse, all the different versions of the heroes, where it seems like most other characters, while they may remember certain things, like certain people dying, the method for how they died seems fuzzy even in their heads, and they certainly don't remember battling an interdimensional godlike being. Their history has now been streamlined, so they don't recall all of this. But Psycho Pirate does, and he's locked up in Arkham Asylum because everyone thinks he's insane.
Yeah, it was kind of a creepy ending. I liked it. I remember. That means all this. He is this Pandora's box that could be opened someday,
and he will be coming up later in an event that certainly cemented me as the lifelong DC Comics fan that I am. But that kind of brings us to the end of Crisis on Infinite Earth. So in the final diagnosis, Todd, how crazy do you think this story could drive someone?
Oh, pretty nuts. I think if you It is meta in that the last page of the story could actually explain what happens to you after trying to read and understand all this without preparation and resources. But I did, before we move on, I do forget that I dropped out, but there is some groundwork for, well, not even groundwork, but kind of a tribute to the first superhero of Superman, Clark Kent, Kal-El, letter L. Alexander Luthor takes he and Superboy and Clark's Lois into a pocket dimension, and we assume they live happily ever after. And why would we think that they wouldn't, right?
Exactly. They get big hero moments, and this is kind of like their version of going to heaven. It's like you don't have to experience death. Your universes are gone, but you can still live in this paradise pocket dimension that Alexander Luthor of Earth 3 has created. And all seems right with them. It's like, okay, here's your just reward for always being such a good hero, and for always being that superhero we all look up to, and the one who helped to set the stage and define it for the generation who comes after you. It's a feel good moment. It's that happily ever after that you always want to see for your major heroes. Unfortunately, it is not to last.
No,
but that's later.
Getting. Yeah, I do. I forgot to talk about it very briefly. Alexander Luthor's creation, or his birth, is kind of like the last moments of Superman, of Jor-El and Krypton. I don't know if you ever caught that. So, you have the Lex Luthor of Earth 3 as this Jor-El figure, where he's saving his son. He's the only survivor of his whole planet, and definitely throwing echoes of the classic Superman origin in there. And I wanted to acknowledge that just because it's obvious. I mean, if you've read it before, you see it, but it's very nicely done.
It was. I really appreciated that a lot, especially in this reading of it. That here you have the destruction of Earth 3 as the Anti-Monitor is wiping it out, and that's the Crime Syndicate Earth. So all the counterparts to Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, etc., they're villains on this Earth, and Lex Luthor is the hero. But he saves his still not quite born son by launching him out into the multiverse, and he's found by Harbinger and the Monitor. And when he's put together, I guess, as it were, in their castle or on their planet, or their mobile moon style ship, it's almost Death Star like in its design. But he grows up really fast, becomes supremely intelligent at a rapid rate, and is one of those characters who, or is this very unique character in that he's made up of both matter and antimatter. So he's able to walk between worlds, which is another callback to Superman by saying he's a child of two worlds.
Right, that's good too. He's very crucial to the story, so you pay attention every time Alexander Luthor is mentioned or shown on screen here. We didn't talk about Wonder Woman seemingly dying, and then later in this issue explaining that she didn't die, she just reverted back to the clay that she was made from.
That was weird. That was something that I felt like is a callback, or is something that gets called back to in Final Crisis when Grant Morrison does something similar to Batman.
Right. Killing him without killing him.
Yes, essentially that's what happens to Wonder Woman. Is she dies without dying. She gets sent back through time to her to the beginnings, her new beginnings on this Earth, this now reformed Earth, rather than killing off one version and just letting another version go on. So yeah, that's a bit of a head trip. And if after all of this you're still not cross-eyed and banging your head against a wall, or maybe needing to be put in a straitjacket in a padded cell alongside the Psycho Pirate, maybe you will feel like going and giving Crisis on Infinite Earths a look. I I'd recommend it after a few other readings, or at least get you some Wikipedia pulled up on some Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then dive into it. That might help.
Read some cool pre-Crisis comics, maybe the Wolfman Perez run of Titans, some Justice Leagues from around that time, Justice League 200, kind of get the flavor for what's going on in the DC universe at this point, and maybe look at some of the comics that featured multiple Earth stories and decide for yourself, well, did they need to do this? Apparently they all decided that, but there were creators who weren't thrilled with this, but it set the stage for the next generation of the DC universe, and quite a lot of things came out of this in the mid to late 80s, including my favorite run of the Justice League, besides the Morrison Porter, was Justice League International. The great George Perez Wonder Woman run, Burn Superman, and then post-Burn Superman with Dan Jurgens, and the Triangle Superman era, where you had weekly Superman comics. It was a great time. You had the great Flash runs with Wade and later John. So, yeah, I mean, it really set up great things that came out of it. And then you got an annual crossover for a while in the DCU.
Yep, and there's a lot of this can be found on the DC Universe streaming app, including the first 6 issues of the new Teen Titans from George Perez and Marv Wolfman. So you can go check that out right now, and then maybe dive into a few other things that you'll find on there. I think some of the George Perez Wonder Woman is there as well. There's lots to find there, but that kind of brings us to the end of this first issue, or this first episode, if you will, of DC Post-Crisis Management. And Todd, I want to say thanks again for showing up and allowing me to talk through my issues here on my couch as we move further into this little mini project of mine. Next time around, we'll be looking at an event that takes place, I believe, is in the early '90s of DC Comics. So the continuity has been going for a little while, and things are seemingly settled. We're in a nice flow up to this point. But then there's going to come along a little event called 0 Hour Crisis in Time. And things are going to get really out there. Things are going to get a little mucked up. But so just as soon as I feel like I've gotten it all straight, someone has to come along and shake things up a bit, as it were. But look for that episode to come out next month. In October, I'll be joined by one half of the Hard Traveling Fanboys. Mr. Greg Phillips will be here to talk with me about 0 Hour and about a story that followed up from there, a story called The Final Night, which for us Hal Jordan fans is a bit of a sore spot. But we will get to that in a few weeks. So thank you again for joining me on DC Post-Crisis Management, and we will see you next time.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We offer them to you on 2 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, along with Main Event, Survey Says, the Monday Night Wars, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction show, as well as Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver special network podcasts and pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Match of the Week podcast, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Through the Years, Worldcast, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Center Stage, and Letters from Kayfabe, plus much more. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as Talkin' Pop, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, NBA Team, PTBN Play, Sunday Groove, Breaking Balls, and Lucha Undead,
as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans
with the hard-traveling fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and Marvel Age podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows, plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback today. All these shows, plus others, available at PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and thehistoryofwrestling.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.